it's time to start now. And today we will have the pleasure to have two young people. The first one is Quentin Griette from the University of Bordeaux. And if I can see your title, Quentin.
Yeah.
So he will talk about phenomenological model and application to SARS-CoV-2 epidemic. And so, please, Quentin.
Okay.
Are you recording?
Yes, we are recording. Yes,
Oh, very good. Very good. Very good.
Yes.
So, please.
Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you all for participating in this seminar. So today I will talk about phenomenological models and their application to the SARS-CoV-2 epidemic. So I'd like to start with the following observations. So since the beginning of the coronavirus outbreak, we have witnessed an explosion of data. So every country began to publish their own set of cumulative number of reported cases. So the time series of reported cases. And so here are some screenshots of a famous website that collected this data and presented it to the public. So for instance, maybe the most famous would be the Johns Hopkins University website that collected the data from all around the world and published it in this part. So the WHO also has a website. This is actually the data we used in several of our studies. And I've put here two of more local examples. So here's in France, we have our own national website where the official data is published. And finally, on the back here, there is a Japanese website that provides very, very detailed data with a lot of information, in particular on the age of the patients that we used in some of our studies. Okay, so the main question I want to try to answer today is how to exploit this data, how to say something meaningful about the disease by just looking at this cumulative reported case data. And so to do that, of course, I will use mathematical models. And so first of all, let me introduce the model that I will use, so that we use in some of our studies, and an example of how to get information from the data. Okay, so in many studies, we used this SIUR model. So probably most of you are very familiar with this kind of compartmental models, but let me explain a little bit how it works anyway. So the basic assumption is that our population can be divided into several classes. A finite number of, so the individuals can be sorted in a finite number of states. This S here stands for susceptible state. So here we put all the individuals that are free of infection and can be infected by the disease. Then we have 3 states of infected individuals. So these are the people that are actually sick and are potentially can transmit the disease to a susceptible. And then after the infection phase, they are removed from the system. So in this model, we assume that either they are fully immunized, so at the time scale of the epidemic, they stay immunized forever, or unfortunately, death is also a possible outcome. Okay, so this model was introduced first for the COVID epidemic by Liu and collaborators. So it's published in Biology in early 2020. So how to move between these states? Let me tell you more about the 3 infectious states. So we distinguish between cases that are eventually reported and cases that stay undetected forever. So these I and U states stand for state of infection in which people do not show many symptoms. So they are, in case of I, they are not yet detected, and in case of U, they are never actually detected. So they never appear on official statistics in particular. And this is an important feature of coronavirus because I've added a reference here to a paper in Nature. There are expected to be a lot of covert infection like that because the range of symptoms is very large, and it can go from very mild symptoms to hospitalization in intensive care units. Okay, and so this model has this particular feature of differentiating between reported cases, so cases that appear in official statistics, and unreported cases that stay hidden forever. Of course, we have to know something about how people get the disease and how how long they stay infected. So this is the parameter of our model. So this tau parameter of the model characterizes the way people get infected. So it contains a lot of information, actually. It contains information on how frequently people get in contact, how likely they are to get infected if there is a contact between a susceptible and an infected and an infectious individuals. And all this information is encoded in the parameter tau. And then, so once they get the disease, we assume that we know the average length of infection, which is a nu. And we also know the fraction of infectious individual that will be eventually reported. And this is F. This is this F parameter. So of course, the other part of the infectious individuals will never go detected, and so they go into the U compartment. And so finally, once they are in one of these two compartments, we assume that we know the duration of infection, the rest of the infection, which is characterized by this eta. So this actually it's 1 over eta. So okay, so this is basically the model. Okay, and the important thing that I want to insist on is that this F characterizes the fraction of individuals that we can detect potentially. Okay, so now the first question we could ask is how to make the link between this model and the data, and in particular, how can we reconstruct the time series of cumulative reported case as an output of our model. Okay, so this is an example of cumulative reported case data that we have from mainland China, actually from the start of near the beginning of the year 2020. Okay, and so in order to identify this reported case as an output of the model, and let me go back just one slide. Reported case are precisely the flux. So the flux of a newly reported case is the flux that goes into this R compartment. And so in a differential equation model, it should be expressed as CR prime. So the differential of CR equals this flux. So nu times F times I. So we have a link between cumulative reported data and the model. But now, of course, this is not sufficient to identify the parameter of the model. So in order to tell you more about the model, and we will first consider the very beginning of the infection. We will focus on a limited time frame at the beginning of the infection, during which we assume that the number of susceptible doesn't change much. And in particular, everything should be then behave like an exponential. In particular, this flux of this number of asymptomatic infectious, this I compartment, should behave like an exponential. Okay, so when we do that, so we focus on this period, and we assume that the I compartment of our system should be growing exponentially. So, so in particular, we know the expression, so the shape of the function CR of t, which should be an exponential function chi1 so an exponential function minus a constant. Okay, so knowing this shape, now we have statistical methods that can provide these three parameters, Chi1, Chi2, Chi3, provide these three parameters in order to match the behavior of the data as closely as possible. Okay, so by using these statistical methods, we can actually identify the shape of this function and the three parameters, Chi1, Chi2, Chi3. And now in the next slide, I will show you how to get the remaining parameters of the model. Actually, you know how to make a link between the parameters of the model. So we start from this function of the cumulative reported case data that we assume that we know completely. So we know these three parameters, Chi1, Chi2, and Chi3. And we will use the differential equation model in order to identify so what is remaining, the remaining information that is missing, which is the initial state, so the initial quantity of infectious individuals, and also of so this is I0, and also the initial quantity of undetected and reported individuals, U0 and R0. Okay, and so in order to identify them, so we use the fact that CR is an exponential and the differential equation, the differential equation system. So, for instance, by definition of CR prime, this new Fi should be equal to the derivative of CR prime, which we can compute explicitly. And so we have I of t and we have I0. Okay. And similarly, we can identify U0 and R0 as a function of the parameters of our model, and this Chi1, Chi2, and Chi3. And so finally, and maybe surprisingly, we can also identify one of the parameters of the system by using this method, which is this tau, this transmission rate that contains a lot of information. And this tau can be identified by using a component of the differential system as a function of the parameters and Chi1, Chi2, Chi3. Okay, so one observation that is important to make about this method is that we have a very precise link between some unknowns of the system and the parameter of and other parameters of the model. So in particular, we have to. I want to draw your attention on the fact that because of this identification, we know that the parameters nu, f, and eta and s0 actually, they cannot be identified from the data because we could choose basically any value that we want and still get a perfect match between the exponential data, so the CR of t, and the output of the epidemic model. So there is no hope to identify either of these quantities. On the other hand, we have the parameters of our system and the initial so the initial state of our system and the parameter tau. So we can do numerical simulation and check how it happens. So when we do that, okay, so we can simulate the in yellow. So here is the autonomous differential equation system SIUR model, and we can compare it to the data. So it works very well during the exponential period at the beginning of the infection. And so unfortunately, we can observe that very soon after this initial exponential phase, it begins to diverge from the data. And this is not necessarily surprising because after this period, then we lose one of the implicit assumptions that we made on our model, which is that this tau of t, the transmission rate tau, is no longer independent of time. And this is because people very soon they begin to react to the presence of the epidemic, and so they modify their behavior in order to escape being infected. So in particular, many of many behavior can lower the tau of T, wearing masks, using hydroalcoholic solution, and respecting some distancing measures. All these have an impact on tau. And in particular, it's very understandable that an autonomous model with tau independent of T should not match the data actually. So in order to correct this behavior, so there are several options. One option is to follow you and collaborators again that use the time-dependent function tau of T, which is fixed in advance, and they identify some global shape of tau of T and identify some parameters in order to determine how to keep as close as possible to the data. So this is one option, and we can see that it works very well. But here I want to focus on another way of thinking that we introduce with some collaborators. So in an article that now is published in Royal Society Open Science. So we extended the analysis, this exponential analysis to a more complex mathematical framework, and we can actually reconstruct exactly the transmission rate from the data. So this is done with two collaborators, so Pierre Magal, who did the introduction, and Jacques de Mongeau from University Grenoble-Alpes. And so in this study, we focus on a slightly simplified system, which is a SIUR model still, but in which U does not contribute to the propagation of the epidemic. And so we are given some non-identifiable parameters, S0, nu, and F, so the duration of infectious period and the fraction of reported cases. And our goal is to identify the missing information to obtain the full system, to a usable system, which are tau of T and I0, the initial number of infectious. Okay, so actually we can identify a tau of T. So among the whole information of this slide, what I would like you to remember is we can take a function n of T that we know a priori. So we take basically any function, and under a very limited number of conditions, we can compute a function tau of T so that the cumulative number of reported cases produced by the SIR model with this transmission rate will be exactly this function n of T. So there are two conditions on this function n of T. It should be increasing because it's a cumulative number, so it's quite natural that it should be increasing, and it has to keep this formula positive. So this is very minimal requirement, but as soon as we can satisfy these two conditions, we obtain a SIUR model which produces exactly this number of this curve of this time series of cumulative reported cases. Okay, and of course we can also identify I0 by this formula. Okay, so because we can take basically any function, any kind of function, we focused on one particular model that can reproduce the behavior of the data. And the one we selected is the solution to the Bernoulli-Verhulst equation, what I will call Bernoulli-Verhulst curves. It's the solution to this differential equation. So there are actually four parameters: this chi, this n infinity, which is the asymptotic number of n, and theta, and also n0. Also, we chose this model because it works very well to reproduce the data, and also it has an explicit solution, so it's relatively easy to compute. Once we identify the parameters, you can compute it basically at any time. Okay, so here is an example of this model drawn against the data from mainland China. So in black dots are the cumulative data, and in the red curve is this Bernoulli-Verhulst curve, which is our what we call a phenomenological model. This model that we use to reproduce the data. And so based on this fit, we can compute a transmission rate tau of t, so that we get this curve as an output of the differential equation system. Okay, so this formula, it looks very complicated, but since we know every parameter, we can compute it. It's not so difficult. Okay, so this is the shape that we obtain when we use this formula with the curve of mainland China. Okay, we obtain a nice decreasing curve that gives the transmission rate at any date. And since so if I go back to the formula, so as I explained before, this f and u, they have to be known by other means. They have to be determined by other methods because they are not identifiable from cumulative reported case data. In particular, we can play around. We can choose to modify this value of nu to see what happens with tau. So this is computed with nu is equal to 0.2. We could also choose a lower nu, so a higher duration of infectious period, in which case you obtain this kind of transmission rate. And this is not good because it becomes negative. So the corollary of this remark is that we can gain an information on this nu by using our method, because it's not possible to observe a negative transmission rate. And so in particular, in order for the data to be compatible with the model, nu has to be higher than some quantity, which is this 0.14 here. Actually, it's km times theta. Okay, so this is a numerical application that states this remark. Thanks to our analysis, we can recover meaningful information on some parameters that are not identifiable a priori. In particular, on 1 over nu, which should be, in case of mainland China, the first wave in mainland China, less than 3.3 days, and the fraction of reported cases. But in this case, we obtain a very low lower bound, which has the magnitude of 10 to the minus 5, so it's not really usable. Okay, so in the last part of my talk, I want to introduce a little bit the method we developed with the same co-authors in order to connect the different waves, because at the present time I focused on a method using the Bernoulli-Verhulst curve, and this one is very good for one epidemic wave, but it's not really good for several waves. So let me explain this in more details. So let's focus on the case of France. Here is the reported case data for France since the beginning of the epidemic. Using the method I previously explained, we can identify the transmission rate and explain the epidemic for the first wave and separately for the second wave. And this is a little bit controversial, but if you look at the rest of the data, it appears that it looks a lot like the beginning of a third wave. So we can match actually the behavior by using exponential growth. Okay, so we can do our analysis in each of these time periods separately, but we would like to have a global model. So we want to explain what happens globally and to produce a method that is usable at any time of the epidemic. Okay, and to do that, we have identified several periods several periods of times, and in blue, it's the blue period correspond to really epidemiological dynamics. So we can think of it as an epidemic wave. So it's the number of cases starts growing like an exponential and then saturate at some value. And in the yellow phase, if we look at the data, it looks very well like the number of new cases is fluctuating around the mean, but doesn't appear to have a more complex behavior. And so this is what we call an endemic phase, because we can just use a straight line as a phenomenological model in these periods. Okay, and so so we have now we can explain separately almost everything that happens in those waves. So we during an epidemic phase, we fit the Bernoulli-Verhulst curves to the data, and we can compute the transmission rate, and also, of course, the effective basic reproduction number R0, which depends on time. And during an endemic phase, well, we use a straight line to match the cumulative number of reported cases, and we can also compute the transmission rate and the effective basic reproduction number. Okay, and so the problem now that I want to draw your attention to this formula of tau, and in particular the fact that it depends on the derivative of CR. So what we want is to connect the phases while keeping the information of tau, so that we can actually reproduce the data by using an epidemic model. And for that, we have to compute this tau of t. And in particular, we have to compute all the derivatives up to the second derivative of CR. So we have to have a very smooth model for CR, because if we don't, then at some point, tau begins to lose its meaning, and we don't know what is tau anymore. We want to avoid that at any cost. So what we need is a smooth interpolation of the data between the phases. Okay, but so after several tries, we found a suitable method. So I let you read the article if you're interested. And so we obtained this kind of curve. So the black dots correspond to the data, and the blue curve to the phenomenological model. So it fits the model quite well. And when we look at the daily number of cases, well, we can see that still the match is very good, and it reveals something that is not very apparent when we look at the data. So from this phenomenological model, it appears that the tendency is to the decrease in the daily number of cases, and this is not really apparent for just by looking at the data. And so similarly, by using our method, we can produce this kind of curve of R0 of t, so the daily basic reproductive number in a way, that are very smooth, okay, and correspond to what we expect. So in that it's decreasing during an epidemic phase because of increase of social distancing and other kind of measures. And during an endemic phase, it's basically stationary at around 1. Okay. So of course, this R0 of t should be used with caution as an indicator of the state of the epidemic, because so its use is not always intuitive, of course. So when you look at the beginning of the epidemic, the R0 is very high, but during the first epidemic wave, for instance, and during the second wave, it's much lower. But when you look at the daily number of cases, let me go back one slide. Of course, the daily number of cases was much lower during the first wave than during the second wave, even though the R0 is much lower. It's because R0 is the rate, so it doesn't see the current state of the epidemic. it is only if it's growing or shrinking. So, and the last good news about our model is that it appears, so by our method, that R0 should be less than 1, sorry, since the beginning of February. And we don't really know why. We just observe it. And so to conclude, I didn't resist the temptation to try to continue our model and see what it says about the future. Of course, we have to be extremely careful about that, because we didn't do a serious sensitivity analysis on the predictions. But anyway, here is what we obtain when we just continue the model after the present date. Okay, this is the red area. Okay, so on the cumulative number of cases, it appears that we should arrive at around 5 million of cases by the 5th of June, which is the last day I chose in this projection, which again has to be taken very carefully. And when we look at the daily number of cases, so one thing that could be important is when will we go below the 10,000 cases per day. And well, according to this projection, this should be near the end of April or beginning of May. Okay, and finally, when we look at the R0, we get this curve, well, this projection. Okay, so this is about all I wanted to say today. Thank you for listening, and now I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Quentin. Very nice talk. So if you want to ask question to Quentin, please raise your hand, and I will allow you to talk. Let me see. I see Jacques has a question. Let me see. Quentin, may you help me to?
Yes, of course. So you have to quit to stop sharing.
Maybe.
That's okay. That's okay.
Because I cannot. I don't see. Maybe you are the only one who can do that. I don't know.
No, you did it with Adolfo.
Yes.
Yes. So Jack, you can talk.
Okay. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Okay. You have characterized the endemic phase by looking at the mean value of the new cases. And what about the variance? It looks that at the end of these endemic phases, the variance of the data is increasing. Is it true or not?
Actually, we didn't look at the variance at all. This is something that we could do in the future, but we only looked at the average value. This is because we want to regularize the model, and so we want to keep we have to keep a deterministic projection.
But if you want to feel what is the end of this endemic, you could perhaps, because by looking only at the average value, it's practically impossible to predict the start of a new wave. And probably there is very hidden in the data something usable to do some predictions, no?
Okay, so I think your question is about if we can detect almost automatically the beginning of a new wave.
Yes.
And so of course variance could be a way to do that. But my intuition says that we should look at the correlation between the new cases and the current state of the new cases and the previous number of new cases, because this is how we could detect the start of an exponential phase.
The acceleration.
Yes, a kind of acceleration.
Acceleration of CR. But you have drawn the acceleration, no?
No, at the present time we didn't.
Okay.
we just fit these curves.
Okay, I will be interested by looking at. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
And your talk was excellent.
Oh, thank you. So
Okay.
there is Chinfuzu. I'm sorry. I'm very bad at pronouncing Chinese, but the parameter nu is the inverse of the length of infectious period. So
asymptomatic infectious.
Yes.
Asymptomatic
yes.
infectious, actually, yeah. Okay. Can you upgrade Jean-Wang Wu, by the way?
Yes, of course. Okay, so Jean-Wang is here.
So probably we will go to.
Sorry, I couldn't find the raise hand button, but I was just going to ask a question.
Okay, please.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. So in your second simpler models where
yes.
you use the reported cases, how would things change if you also I think you didn't account for the asymptomatic cases, right, or the undetected cases?
Yes, that's right.
So would that change your sort of functional form of tau of t if you tried to sort of jointly estimate the total true cases?
Yes, actually, yes. We are actually just working on this method for the more complex model right now. And what I can say is that it changes somehow the formula. The qualitative behavior is relatively robust to this kind of perturbation, but it adds a derivative on top of what we require now. So we actually need a little bit to smooth a little bit more, but basically we can do the same. It's just a little bit more complex to do so. We can also use the more complex model now.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, thank you. So
maybe we if there is no more question, maybe we can start with the talk of. Oh no, it's 42. So maybe we wait a little bit, just in case.
So there is a.
Xing Fu.
You can talk now.
Yeah, hi Pierre, and content nice talk.
Hello.
Pierre said that there's still a few minutes left, so I decided to make questions. Don't waste the time, right?
That's right.
Okay. In your model, so in the first part, you have the first eyes you define as by the notion you call it symptomatic, right? So, but there's as a Cameron mentioned, there's also type of asymptomatic, right?
Yes.
So from symptom, then they further spread into two of reported and unreported. And the U is those people who have shown symptoms but are not reported.
Right.
And so under the assumption that a reported case, people will be quarantined, will not get involved in the infection, will not infect people.
Yes.
So but what about those? So those, because there's some evidence that there's also asymptomatic infections. It's not showing in your model. You may.
Yes, that's right. That's more or less the same problem as Cameron mentioned. So let me go back to the model. So here in the simple model, we only keep the information of the infectious individuals, and we lose the fact that they are reported or unreported. So because the unreported do not contribute to the infection in a way. But in the original model, in the original model, we keep this information, and when you look at the shape of the transmission function, then you see that the unreported, so the asymptomatic cases, they do contribute to the transmission of the disease.
Okay.
And we can also plug a new parameter here if we want to differentiate the way that the two states contribute in a way to the disease. So this is all possible, and this is all ongoing investigation. Actually, this is all something. This is something that this is a new study that it's almost at the end. So I don't want to talk too much about this, but.
So what do you mean? There might be, you can draw another area from eye to removed, because those people who do not show symptoms or directly recovered. Because
oh, you mean directly from this eye state to removed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We never show any symptom, right?
But so after the asymptomatic phase, they would stop contributing in a way to the.
Yeah, directly recovered from asymptomatic stage.
Yeah, we didn't look into this this possibility actually.
Anyway, very interesting, especially the transmission rate at tau, and then you have various discussions. So has the paper published yet?
Many paper.
Yeah, some of them. The last two studies. So
okay.
This one is published already. This one where we compute the transmission rate. And also the last one, well, it's submitted, it's not published yet, but it's available on medRxiv if you want. Yeah.
So my understanding is, if we got this formula, is that your transmission rate is not in the original sense of which is a purely biological medical sense, showing how severe this disease is. Right? But
what
now,
are you talking about now? Excuse me. Say it again, please.
Me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm interested. You have the transmission rate tau function. Yes. So my understanding is not in the original sense now, right? Because now you have all using the data. I mean,
but you try to reconstruct the transmission rate. That is the point.
Yeah.
You don't know what this is, right?
Yeah.
So basically, you try to reconstruct it from the data.
So the most original transmission rate is something reflecting how severe, I mean, the disease, the virus is. But now if you're using this information because the infection, the data also reflected the result of intervention. So it's a true practical transmission rate.
Yeah.
The transmission rate is time dependent.
Yeah. So maybe I should say one more time, the transmission rate, that what we call the transmission rate, of course, it contains a lot of information that could be separated potentially, like the probability of a contact between people, or the probability that when there is a contact, the disease will be transmitted, and so on. So there is actually a lot of information in this tau of T.
That's true. That's tau has incorporated all kinds of effect, like a human intervention, or
yes, exactly.
And those kinds. So okay.
Maybe we should go to the next speaker because we are late.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. So Cameron, can you show your slides?
Share the screen. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Let me just go to full screen mode here.
Okay.
Oh.